Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to go through analysis of June Solstice 2024, and it seemed like the kind of overall energy for this time is digging deep for endurance. And even this picture that I selected here of this maybe person out in a boat, seeming like in the middle of the ocean with the moon, indicating the mind usually, and then this deep well here, and then the sort of magical appearance of the whale from deep below the surface. This picture seemed to, kind of really depict the energy for this time. So let's get into it. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, or professional or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic Astrology, Jyotish are my videos. All of my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, I'm big into playlists, so I'm always slotting my videos in playlists so that they're easier to find. So, I have like planets, grahas playlist, houses, bhavas playlist, yogas, planetary combinations playlist. So if I talk about a planet and you'd like to learn more about the symbolism, or I talk about a specific house and you'd like to learn more about symbolism, you can go to those places to get what you need in terms of more information. The other thing is if you like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, I've analyzed a lot of birth charts, famous birth charts on this channel. And I have a birth chart archive list 2024 video where I list all the birth charts I've gone through and the video you can find them in, so that they're easier to find. Then again, more helpful videos to watch along with this one. So North, South, and East Indian style charts. I also cover Western style charts in the video, but it's not part of the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Introduction to the constellations or rashis. Constellation or rashi categories. Planetary aspects. Natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas. Chidra grahas or planets of vulnerability. Planetary exaltation, debilitation. Nicca, bhanga, breaking debilitation. Bhavat, bhavam, house of the house concept. Nakshatras or lunar mansions. And then there's a whole bunch of yogas, planetary combinations. So budhaditya yoga, the intelligence combination. Parivartana yoga, exchange of houses. Saraswati yoga, artist combination. Pravraja yoga, life focus combination. Sarpa yoga, which is kind of an ambition combination. Kesari yoga, which is a networking combination. And then the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. So a lot of information out there for you as you need it. Okay, so here is a chart for the exact moment of time for the June Solstice 2024. This is going to be June 20th, 2024, or 1650 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time is what this chart is lined up for. The day lord at this time is Jupiter, and the Hora lord or hour lord is Mercury. So already from that, Jupiter and Mercury, the two communication planets, they're also the two learning planets. So, again, looks like there's a big learning opportunity here potentially. And the Shah period, so this is the planetary period, is at this moment in time Mercury, Venus, Mercury. And Mercury represents friends, and Venus represents loved ones. And you can see here, Mercury and Venus are actually together in the 9th house here in the sign of Gemini, which Mercury owns. So it's a very Mercury-dominated time. And Mercury represents things like communication, travel, decisions, what else? Learning, education, technology, to some extent, writing, that sort of thing. And Venus represents loved ones, especially spouse or spouse-like partner, and socializing, that sort of thing. Well, both of these planets are currently combust, meaning they're so close to the sun you can't see them. So there might be deep within some tension between these two planets here. Because as you can see, Venus and Mercury are just a couple degrees apart, and we literally got out of planetary war between these two earlier today at the time of this recording. I'm recording this a few days before the solstice. So at least they've gone through war and they're starting to move apart. So there's kind of like a recovery period here. And it seems like deep within there was some kind of decision made, potentially about a friend or a loved one, or a lot of thoughts going on um, about this. The other thing is that these planets, Mercury and Venus, you can see here with Sun. And Sun you can see because it is basically eclipsing Mercury and Venus. Sun represents leadership, like the king, president, that sort of thing. The only thing, though, is that Sun is also compromised here because Sun represents things like father, and it's in the ninth house, which also represents father. So we call that kind of position for the Sun karako bhava nasha. So that might sound like a good idea, but it's almost like there's too much energy here. So there's some tension, deep tension within about recovering some kind of fallout or tension with loved ones and trying to like lead forward is what I'm seeing here already from just what I've mentioned so far. Okay, now this Mercury Venus Mercury dasha period. Mercury and Venus are two long dashas, so as you can see, we're not shifting into Mercury Venus Ketu until November 1st, which is 6 weeks or so from the next solstice. So it seems like it's going to be kind of a long, sort of a long haul, unfortunately, in terms of like maybe recovering from this tension or recovering from, again, it could be a decision that was made, maybe ending of a friendship or relationship or business partnership. It could be a business as well. When we have Mercury in its own house, that can indicate somebody who, like if this is a person chart, that can indicate somebody who's really interested in entrepreneurial activities. As Mercury represents business, and a lot of things were associated with business, like accounting and marketing and networking and all those sorts of things. Yeah, so it looks like already. Now you probably already figure out like why it shows that picture of the whale, person in the boat in the middle of the ocean. It looks like this is kind of an uncertain time, and also a time that endurance is going to be needed because I'm not sure this is going to be a fast recovery. But at least we're in recovery mode. At least so then again, Mercury, Venus, Mercury is not shifting to Mercury, Venus, K2 until November 1st. And the thing is with K2 has this energy of like loss and separation, typically, and it's an erratic planet. So K2 here, and you can see also K2 in this chart is in the 12th house of losses and expenditures and that sort of thing. So even though these, Mercury and Venus will be in different places by the time November rolls around, and I don't know exactly where they're going to be, but probably close to the opposite side of the chart. It could be at the top of the chart. That might be nice if Venus is in Libra. But in any case, there's still some like losses going on here, and maybe even a sense of isolation because K2 can be a separatist planet and a separatist planet, and it's in the 12th house of losses and expenditures, but also isolated places. And the lord of that 12th house is Mercury, which again is combust. And even though it's Swa, it's also again just coming out of war with Venus. The other thing is when you have Mercury in its own house like this, that can also indicate somebody who's interested in meditation or Buddhism. And so there might be a really strong, because of the challenges going on here, there might be a real strong push, like even internal push to maybe take up a meditation practice or learn about Buddhism or something like that, or some facets of that. to help move through the challenges that we'll talk more about. Okay. So, and again, this K2 may not only be like, isolating oneself, although that does seem to come through with the chart. But again, this could be loss or separation from loved ones and friends, or possibly business. But I'm not really seeing that because we have two indications here of entrepreneur. Like again, if this is somebody's chart, we have Mercury in its own sign in the ninth house, and then we have Mars in its own sign in the seventh house of independent business. So if this was a person's chart, I would most likely be thinking that they were an entrepreneur. Okay. Then the moon oh, sorry, I missed that line. The Lagna nakshatra. So the Lagna is the rising sign. The rising sign is this diamond in the top middle. In the chart, it happens to have a little 7 in the bottom corner. That 7 represents the seventh constellation of the zodiac, or Libra, Tula in Sanskrit. But it is the first house. So 7th constellation of the first house. So Libra rising chart. And the Lagna nakshatra, so nakshatra is a lunar mansion. Every night the moon moves into a different nakshatra. There's 7 nakshatras. So after about 27 nights, we get a lunar month. And that gives us more, depth and clarity about some of the energies coming through. So the Lagna nakshatra, the overriding nakshatra energy for the chart is Vishaka. Now, Vishaka is symbolized by a victory gate, but it's kind of a harsh victory. It can be like a victory at all costs. So it may be that, whatever victory is had here is, it's going to be hard to get at. And it may be that, there's unfortunately some collateral damage. Like it might be, for example, choosing oneself over another person or another relationship, that kind of thing. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's the energy coming through there. Then the moon nakshatra, the moon is in a nakshatra called Jesta. Jesta is symbolized by a talisman, so there's this protective energy. So the mind is kind of in protective mode. So again, I think what we're seeing here is that considering the challenges going on here, again, if this is a person, this is somebody who is determined to succeed, and they're in protective mode. Their mind is in protective mode to make sure that they succeed. Like because there are some pretty strong negative influences in the chart. And again, since we're talking about June solstice here, we're essentially talking about the next 6 months. So it looks like there are challenges coming up that's going to be hard to ameliorate. And kind of what I'm seeing here is a bit of like a self-preservation energy, essentially. Yeah. So the other thing is that in the sort of more general social context at this moment in time is that we're just coming off of Father's Day. So, with Father's Day, part of that energy is about, acknowledging elders and their nurturing, protective, especially with father's protective energy. So we're getting more of that protective energy. And then Juneteenth, we just celebrated yesterday. It's a relatively new holiday in the United States, but that includes this energy of freedom. And then also around this time, there's some major Muslim holidays, so the Hajj and also Eid al-Adha. So the Hajj is, that's about a long pilgrimage to Mecca, which Muslims, if they're able to make, are encouraged to make as part of their, religious observance. So again, that's like a long pilgrimage and also sacrifice. And then also Eid al-Adha, that's about when there was a sacrifice there of somebody sacrificing their own child, and I believe the story is that the child was turned into a sheep or something like that. So again, these are like heavy energies, but there's also again leadership, nurturing, protection here. The other thing is that even though I think there are heavy energies in this chart, There's also a lot of power. So there are three Raj yogas here. We have Saturn in its own sign in a Trikona. We have Mars in its own sign in a Kendra, and we have Mercury in its own sign in a Trikona. So that's three Raj yogas. That's a lot of, again, Raj yogas bring power. So Saturn, indicates things like perseverance and endurance. Mars indicates things like innovation and kind of rebelliousness, and Mercury represents the intelligence and the logical mind. So those three planets are particularly strong. So endurance, initiative, and intelligence and decision-making logic are, part of this chart. And I think part of the, again, protective energy, part of what, again, if this was somebody, part of their superpowers that they use to help them move through challenging times. Okay, and as I mentioned, Mercury and Venus just got out of war. So when you have planets in war, planetary war or graha yuddha, it not only destabilizes the planets, but it also destabilizes the planet or the houses that they own, with the planet. It destabilizes the houses that the planets own. So with Mercury and Venus, that means that the lugna, the rising sign, is going to be destabilized. It's also combust. So this could mean that, like, for this person, they feel eclipsed a lot of the time. They don't. They feel like they're not seen. So the lugna is going to be compromised. Also, the eighth house of deep psychology is compromised. The ninth house of authority and leadership and father is going to be compromised. Also, guru, teacher, and then the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So you can see, again, just these two planets at war also is showing us that um, whatever going on here, is going on at a pretty deep level. Okay, so let's go through house by house as I normally do. So starting at the top with Lugna rising sign, again, we have a Libra or Tula rising sign. Libra is a movable air sign, so that means that there's a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts, which again makes sense because just the Dasha period pointing us towards Mercury Venus is pointing us towards Mercury, which is again in its own sign. And it's also with this challenge Venus and challenge Sun, and all three together create what we would call a pravraja yoga, so a life focus combination. So again, with if this was a person's chart, not just sort of like an energy overriding energy for the next 6 months, this is somebody who would definitely be focused on ninth house issues such as religion, such as authority, such as father, such as government, even. So not only is this person potentially like an entrepreneur, but I believe that, again, if this was a person, they would be involved in government or at least be like subsidized by the government or be a subcontractor for the government or that sort of thing. And they might have two things going on, like work for the government on some level and then have some entrepreneurial things going on the side, potentially, yeah. So, okay, so Libra Lugna, movable air sign in Sanskrit is Chara Vayu. So this Lugna is aspected by a Swam Mars, a very strong Mars. Mars again is a innovation planet, a rebellious planet, activity planet, a fighting planet. So there's some, fight again. If this is a person, there's some fight here going on. There's some initiative going on. And Mars is in a nakshatra called Bharani. Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So again, there's this kind of a little bit of a harshness associated with Bharani because there's this like, in some ways pretty harsh cycles, right? When a baby's born, even though that's, magical in some ways, it's like in order for that to come through, like you're literally, having to uh, break through tissues and structures and stuff like that, right? So we don't normally focus on that, but it's part of what happens in that process. So there's some new. So again, if we're getting like, if we're talking about cycles of life and death, and we've got Mars here, this would mean like somebody who's like a innovator, or a rebel. Give me a second. Hmm. So, sorry. Again, if this is a person's chart, this would be somebody who's a fighter and who starts new things, like a pioneer. That's the word that's coming to mind. Now again, the Lugnatia, the ruling planet of the chart Venus, is combust, so you can't see it. The other thing is that Venus is in a nakshatra called Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a drop of water, and that's related to either and or a storm, like a rainstorm, or a teardrop, like sadness. So kind of stormy conditions you can think of, right? So internally, this would probably be somebody who's quite stormy within themselves and has faced a lot of storms. Was it because again, it's the rising sign, so the time at which they were born was a stormy time, and that might be literal. Like some people, when they have Ardra associated with the first house, it might be that they were born very close to some major storm, like a tornado or something like that. But because Venus is combust, it may not be obvious that this person has been through a lot because, again, not only is Venus in Ardra, so the stormy energy, but it's with Mercury, also combust, also in this Ardra, nakshatra. So deep down, there's a lot of tumultuous thinking and feeling that's not obvious to most people. And this can be related to making decisions about loved ones and social connections and stuff like that. Because Venus, again, represents socializing a loved one. So now Venus, the Lugnatia, the ruling planet of the chart, is gone to the 9th house, which is a Dharmasthana. So Dharmasthana is all about dharma or duty. So this is somebody who would have a very strong sense of duty, especially because you have, again, 3 planets in a house of duty. You also have Saturn in another house of duty in the 5th house. So 4 out of 9 planets are in Dharmasthanas. But again, the Dasha period, if you think of this as a person that's being born, Mercury, Venus, Mercury, this is somebody who's going to be very dedicated to their duty, and that's what they're going to put first in life, most likely. There's also, again, the sense of self-sacrifice because Venus, the Lugnatia, is eclipsed or combust at this time. And then I mentioned this is with Swa, combust, Mercury, also in Ardra. So again, deep within this person, there's a lot of, I think, tumultuous energy. And again, for the next 6 months, it looks like this is the energy that's going to be prevalent for the next 6 months, from this June solstice until the December solstice. And then let's see. Oh, the other thing about the sun, so besides being karako bhava nasha, so again, the planet representing father and the house representing father, usually that indicates that there's problems with the father. Sometimes between, excuse me, sometimes between the native and the father, but sometimes just the father in and of themselves. So when I see this Mercury Venus combo situation in Ardra with the sun, sorry, um, uh, Bhavanasha, I would think that the father of this person, if we were looking at a person, would be very chaotic internally. Have a lot of probably be an entrepreneur, probably be a leader, probably be very good at like marketing, but deep within would have like a lot of just a stormy, atmosphere within themselves, essentially. Be contentious, fight with people, fight with loved ones, fight with business partners, that sort of thing. The other thing about the sun is it's bhavam, so meaning the sun is the ruler of the 11th house here, and the 11th house lord is gone 11 houses away. So what that can mean is that the 11th house represents things like clubs, groups, society, and income. And since that is gone, bhavam, you would see like one group after another, one income after another. So again, if we're talking about a father, or if we're talking about potentially like a government position or something like this would potentially be maybe somebody, not just a government job, but maybe like a political type job. This would be like one income stream after another, one group after another. So this is somebody, not just the native, but the father, on some level, in different capacities, are going to be, um, they're both on some level going to be involved with many, many groups and many, many streams of income. Like maybe somebody who jumps around from job to job or group to group. And with this person, because they have these three Raj yogas, and this combination here, they've gone to the ninth house. The other thing is that, again, if we look at the Shah period, we're starting off in Mercury. After Mercury comes Ketu, after Ketu comes Venus, and after Venus comes Sun. So, again, if we're talking about a person here for almost the first 40, 50 years of their life, they're going to be involved in ninth house issues. So politics, religion, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, so again, there's something about here in this chart, that's very tumultuous time and upbringing and probably parents. And we haven't talked about mom yet, but it looks like dad's not the most stable, although on the surface, dad looks like somebody who's very, appealing. The other thing about the sun, like in terms of like the bhavam of the sun from the 11th house of many streams of income and many groups and clubs and societies, sun is in a nakshatra called Mrigashirsha, which is symbolized by the head of a deer. So Mrigashirsha is all about seeking. So again, this could be like a traveling salesman type energy in the ninth house for a father, but in the for the native, this might be like some sort of what would I say, like an outreach coordinator, like somebody who's trying to gain public support through difficult times. This might be somebody who, like, I could see this being like somebody who works for FEMA. FEMA in the United States, it's like when different storms come through and it like wrecks houses and buildings and stuff like that. There's a division of the government that helps to rebuild, provide some monies and resources to rebuild. Um, yeah, I mean, among other things, but you kind of get the gist here. So seeking this could also be like for elections and stuff like this. This might be somebody who's like constant looking for like support and money for like political candidates, stuff like that, or for themselves potentially, if they're the political candidate, which could very well be here. Okay. So all of this together, what I'm saying here is that this is a thought leader, because we have more than aspecting into, what is it, Libra, so a movable air sign, so a thought leader, very headstrong with this Mars, and also the Vishaka energy and Ligna. Somebody's quite passionate, but there's also sadness here. Like this person has clearly been through a lot, I would say. Also innovative, rebellious, always looking for solutions. Um, but again, I'm getting this sort of like crisis manager, counselor type energy, from this person because they have been through a lot, and because they spend so much of their energy, just even in time, like through the Shah period in the ninth house of leadership and Dharma, like that's what they see. Is it's almost like if they had a father or some other parental figure. And again, we haven't gone to the fourth house of mother yet, but you'll see mom's not super stable either. If this person essentially went through an unstable time growing up, it's almost like they had to compensate for their parents not being very stable, and they stepped up and kind of took over. And so they somehow found leadership within themselves because other people around them who usually provide that were not able to or capable of it. And now that's what they do, professionally even. Yeah, so, and I could also see like this Mercury Venus Sun combination in the ninth house being like a head of some sort of crisis center. that kind of stuff kept coming through. Now, there's a bunch of different yogas in this chart. So Kala Sarpa, most of the planets on one side of Rahu, Ketu, that axis, that's going to provide ambition, as if it wasn't obvious already with this person. Then there's going to be, again, the Shasha Yoga, Ruchika Yoga, and Bhadra Yoga. So Shasha is the Saturn in its own sign, in a Kendra Trikona. Ruchika is Mars in its own sign, in a Kendra Trikona. And Bhadra is also Mercury in its own sign, in a Kendra Trikona. So again, that means super strong Saturn energies, Mars energies, and Mercury energies. There's also a Kesari Yoga here with Jupiter aspecting Moon, or at least in a Kendra from the Moon. It's not super strong, but it's there. Kesari Yoga can indicate like networking. There is also budhaditya Yoga, Mercury and Sun in the same sign. It's not qualified though, so it may not be super strong. It seems like there is intelligence in this person, but it's not necessarily coming through the Mercury Sun Budhaditya Yoga. It's I would see more of that coming through with the Mercury in its own sign as a Bhadra Yoga. So there is intelligence there, just not through that particular yoga. So altogether, drive, power, intelligence, leadership, endurance as well. This is somebody who can start something and see it through to the end. And then the chidra grahas. So the chidra grahas are planets of vulnerability. In this chart, there are Moon, Mars, and Saturn twice over. So if we look at where Moon and Mars and Saturn are, so you can see Moon is in the second house of family and inner circle. You can also see that the dispositor of that, lord of the second house, is Mars. And Mars and Saturn both aspect the second house. So Moon, Mars, and Saturn twice over, basically all the chidras have a relationship with the second house of family inner circle. So again, that's indicating to me, especially when you have Moon and Jesta, protective energy. So that's the mind, intuitive mind, emotional mind. Mars, so innovator, rebellious energy, and like creating something new. And Saturn in its in the Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign, so fixed ideas. And Saturn is in a nakshatra called Purva Bhadrapada right now, which is symbolized by the front legs of a funeral pyre. So that's also a very kind of destructive, transformative type energy. So all this together in the second house is telling me that on some level there was like a protective energy. There's a protective energy of this person, but there was a lot of chaos going on and a lot of like long-term things, like just a tough situation grips that never really seemed to break or give, that created a lot of endurance and strength in this person. But yeah, not a lot of stability, I would say there, or at least cushion. Definitely not cushion, definitely not sweetness. There is a little bit here, like you do have Jupiter aspecting from the 8th house, and Jupiter is in Rohini, which is really nice. Rohini is a nakshatra that's supposed to be like one of the most attractive, kind of pleasant, beautiful type energy. So deep in the 8th house of deep psychology is this, notion of being optimistic and pleasant and thinking about beautiful things and that sort of thing. But it just seems like the outer reality for this person is very strenuous and has been since childhood. So this person might be an optimist, and that's why they keep kind of, it looks like, stepping up to the plate and stepping into leadership roles. But it seems to me like over time, this would probably, um, be exhausting, frankly. And that's what I'm seeing in the chart as a whole. So you do see Moon, Mars, and again Saturn, all the chidras in the second house. That's a big, kind of Achilles heel for the person. And where else do they meet up? Also, Saturn is aspecting Mars, and Mars. So two chidras related to the seventh house of independent business, but also relationships, especially spouse, like partner. So it looks like that there's challenge there. And then what else do we have? We have Mars aspecting and debilitated in the 10th house of career, but more like career, like 9 to 5 type jobs. So because of the strong planets in the 7th house and 9th house, I would think that this person, again, wasn't like a 9 to 5er, in like a in the private sector. It would be more of a government. I think this person probably starts as a government person, maybe has some entrepreneurial things on the side, and or is like ends up becoming a consultant for government. So they're kind of involved in government, like a crisis manager, when the government hits the skids for different scenarios. Like this might be somebody who steps in and helps out. Um, what else here? Oh, also the 11th house, I would say, is compromised because Saturn is aspecting the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. So it does seem like, again, in various ways, like the second house of family, inner circle, the seventh house of partner, spouse, like partner, business partners, the fifth house of children, and the 11th house of clubs, groups, and societies. And then we have this, planetary war, just recently out of a planetary war in the ninth house of like not just secular groups, but like satsang, spiritual groups. Like it just seems like even though this person seems like well intended, it's almost like this might be somebody who like rubs people the wrong way despite their good intentions. They're a change maker. They're great in a crisis. They can kind of, kind of suck it up and put on their, mental, emotional armor and get through crises, and that's like admirable. But again, with Venus combust, I think before I've mentioned when I see Venus combust in charts, I've actually often seen those that Venus combust in charts of people who have like autism, different forms of autism, not always, but and so again, a lot of autistic, children, people, they may not be able to express their emotions very well. And so again, there's strength here. I mean, Saturn's strong, Mars is strong, Mercury's strong, but those are all like physical strength, mental strength, but and even though I think deep down this person is optimistic, um, with the Vishika energy, they're successful, but um, again, I think they might rub people the wrong way, or it might be hard for them to form closer relationships with people. Um, yeah, and express their, true feelings and things like that. Like, be more warm and fuzzy and open. Um, Definitely not coming across as like a marshmallow, so like a marshmallow type. Um, what else here? So yeah, so again, all these chidra girl has difficulties with family, 9 to 5 jobs, relationships, I would say generally. Um, Also, just before I forget about the Venus combust. So not only is Venus combust, but it's basically dominated by this massive Mercury, even though Mercury's combust as well. So there is this like, part of the storm of this person is, mind versus heart, and it looks like for this person, the mind's going to win out. So again, not warm and fuzzy, but definitely like this is somebody if you're on a desert island and want to survive, this is the kind of person you'd want with you. They'll get you through. They'll chop down trees and make a raft and build a fire. Like this is that kind of person. So so altogether, so this is somebody also I could see being a serial entrepreneur. With all this entrepreneurial energy and in politics, some combination of the two probably. But also with this sun and karako bhava in the ninth house, so difficulties with father and authority. I think that's why they became one. is what I'm seeing here. And so again, since we're not talking about specifically a person, but this moment in time, it may be that, for the next 6 months or so, this is the energy that's important to step into. It may not be warm and fuzzy, um, but it might be a matter of like, endurance and survival. Um, yeah, it might, and that's not too far, I think, from the overall energy. What I started with is digging deep for, endurance and strength is like, yeah, that's the energy that may be needed over the next few months. So not light and fluffy, not definitely a cream puff time. Um, but there are gifts to be had from this, like they even had like what was a like they've done studies on like military people who've been through like all kinds of strange and traumatic incidents and stuff like that. And like they'll even like one of the simple things you can do is like a medical thing is like you can take a light and shine it in somebody's eyes, and you can kind of see if their pupil kind of shakes a little bit and doesn't like hold, the constriction, because when you shine light in somebody's eyes, the pupil will constrict normally, unless there's a medical issue or they're on drugs or something like that. But the thing is, like, that's one kind of general way to determine if somebody has adrenal fatigue is that the iris will shake a little bit. It won't be like a strict constriction of the pupil. And when you do that with like military personnel, for example, or some sort of like trauma survivalist, somebody who's had that kind of training, their pupil does not, like shake because they've been through so much trauma. It's almost like it makes them immune to other traumas. But the thing is, sometimes what happens with that is that, again, part of the way that they develop that inner strength is they put up these internal walls with other people. And so that might be like this type of person, I would say. So maybe it looks like a lot of trauma in early years, unstable parents, at least a father. Um, and the other thing is since Mercury's combust and it's also the Lord of the ninth house, this might be a father, because again, Sun's in Mrigashirsha, that's like a traveling energy. This might be a father who's kind of in and out of this person's life. Like even though they have a father, it might be a father that they don't see very much because again, the father looks like the father in this scenario is unstable. So that's why they ended up, almost like lost their childhood. It's is what I'm seeing here as well. They didn't have time to just fool around and ride their bike and I don't know, eat ice cream and watch fireworks like some kids do. This is somebody who stepped into duty and authority from day one, from birth. Like look, like again, Mercury, Venus, Mercury, the dasha, birth dasha is goes right to the ninth house of duty. What else? Oh, also the sun is yogi, so that's one planet that's represents wealth. And then Saturn represents the Aviyogi, so that's a planet that can represent dearth. And then the duplicate yogi is Venus. So with Sun and Venus being two planets representing wealth, you can see that this person, again, getting back to, and then also Sun being the Lord of the 11th house, is that this political affiliation or job or subcontracting, whatever they're doing, brings in money for this person. But you can see that there's a drag on here because you have this massive Saturn, which is stronger than either of those planets on the 11th house. So, what I was saying from this is that there might be money to be had, like income to be had from going into politics or government on some level. But this is a job that's also not going to be high paying because it's a public service job. Even if this is like an NGO, um, we don't see this being a lot of money. The other thing is that, Saturn, this Aviyogi, is aspecting not only the 11th house of income, but the second house of savings. So the two money houses. The other thing is Saturn is aspecting onto um, the seventh house of independent business, where it's not only, aspecting there, but it's debilitated there. So I think that this is somebody who works really hard, but I'm not sure, despite all the movement and activities and all the probably amazing things they do, I'm not sure this is a high income person. Um, Also because like Venus is a duplicate yogi and it's combust, so that may be wealth that you don't see. So like it might be like if they're in government and stuff like this, it might be the part of the wealth that they gain from being involved in government on some level is that it's the connections more than actual like cash dollars and things like that that are bring wealth to this person. Um, and then the Abhiyogi. What else? Oh, and the Abhiyogi Saturn is also Lord of um, the fourth house of family line. So, based on this, I would assume that growing up and ancestors and things like that, grandparents and stuff, probably coming from a lot of wealth, and for this person, yeah. All right, so you're getting a general energy of the chart already so far, right? So let's move on to the second house. So the second house lord is this, massive Mars and aspecting into its own sign. So there is some strength here in the second house, but because the Mars is so strong and Saturn is there as well, and Mars is in Bharani, so again, it's not a sweet and gentle etc. And neither is Saturn. I see a lot of tumultuous energy in the second house, and maybe even some, how would I say, like potentially violence. Again, I don't see this being like a very gentle type energy. The only saving grace really is really the moon, but again, there's a protective energy. So again, it might be that if there was violence involved in the family situation, that this person became quite protective of self and maybe others, and that's why they stepped into this kind of authority, kind of naturally stepped into this authority position. But you do have at least Jupiter aspecting into the second house. So with Jupiter there, it could be like it sounds funny, but like this kind of mix. It could be like a music or something like that. That was kind of a saving grace, or singing or something like that. Like even that was tumultuous and stuff like that. Like maybe in the midst of all that, um, there was a strength that was built, but also like I would say like a strong voice as well. Like not only strong character, but strong voice. And it might actually be like an artistic type voice, like singing. But probably somebody, again, like we're getting authority here coming into the voice because the second house represents like oral communication. So that's probably part of what this person leans on to step into roles of power. Like they just sound like an authority, and sometimes just sounding like authority, people will start following you even if you don't know what you're doing. So, um, so and the moon also represents like mother and women, and emotions, imagination. So, again, if there was a very strong, challenging upbringing here, there's still some optimism, mental optimism here. Like they weren't crushed by all this. Somehow they felt like they could overcome circumstances and do better. And it looks like they did. I think the challenge here, though, is on the emotional level and forming connections because, again, it looks like in order to survive, they need to create walls, internal walls between themselves and the chaos around them. And they never learned how to like dismantle those walls. So it's hard to let people in now. So there's, also could be a protective energy of family, but through difficulties and, also thinking and advocating about how to rescue and salvage things and turn lemons into lemonade. This is the kind of stuff I was seeing. And then again, variable, things going on with money and assets and stuff like that. I don't see it being very stable. Um, Even though Mars is aspecting its own house, Mars is not a stable planet. And it could be also turnover of homes and things like that. So actually, with this entrepreneurial energy in the seventh house, Mars in its own sign, and Saturn aspecting, both of those planets are bhumi karakas. They're both planets representing real, like property, real estate. And Saturn being in Purva Bhadrapada and Mars being in this, Bharani energy, I could see this being somebody who like flips houses or like manages properties or something like that. So that could be part of what they do is kind of a side thing, or also later in life because once they get out of Sun, then they go into Moon, Mars. Yeah, so the first part of life, it's going to be more of this ninth house energy, and then over time, you're going to get more of the seventh house independent energy of also consulting because Saturn in its own sign in the fifth house of counseling. Um, being in Purva Bhadrapada, this is somebody who's going to help counsel people on how to create new structure and stability after chaos and crisis. So the third house, moving on, so the third house lord is Jupiter. So, again, there's some third house is looking, pretty nice actually. Because the lord is with Jupiter and Rohini, and then Mercury, Venus, and Sun are aspecting the third house. And the third house can represent classic art. So, this could be somebody again who not only was involved in ninth house issues, but in authority and leadership and stuff like this. But it looks like they're also interested in art, and that's part of their. That's one of the saving graces, or like if I'm looking for houses where I feel like there's a little bit of like ease, because there's not much here. I would see the third house as being pretty nice, actually. Even though Mercury and Venus are combust and they're just coming out of war, with Venus and Mercury aspecting the third house again, I could see this being somebody who does like writing or journaling, painting, maybe. Um, it could also be like a digital type thing, like writing on a computer or doing art on a computer, something like that, because it's an ardra, so there's like electricity here. This could also be somebody who's like into photography, I would say. Um, and then you have sun there. So there's energy here. So I think the arts, like the more emotional, I think the way this person expresses their emotions, since it may not be verbal, maybe not with the singing, but it does seem like this person is expresses themselves like through their hands. Because the Mercury is there, Mercury represents the hands, and the third house also represents hands and arms. And so maybe like crafting or writing, journaling, or it could be like songwriting if they're a singer, if they're into music. Maybe it's kind of that kind of stuff. The other thing is that Jupiter here, being in the 11th house, um, and also the 11th being in the eighth house, and the eighth house lord being Venus. So you have two planets related to the eighth house and third house. So again, I think for this person, like it's almost like they may not realize it, but like whatever kind of artistic, creative stuff they do is actually fairly therapeutic for them and their way of kind of expressing their emotions, if not, face to face or one on one, or again, if they're a crisis manager, they can't. That's not necessarily the best time to be vulnerable or show vulnerability, right? They have to be strong for other people. Um, There's also probably a brother here for this person, because the sun is aspecting. Maybe not, maybe not. Yeah, and sun is a male planet, and Sagittarius in the third house is a male constellation. So there might be a brother in the mix here, but there's also like some sadness. But again, I'm seeing that this sadness um, of siblings potentially, but also like this art therapy is what I kept seeing in the third house of like, how do they deal with their sadness? Is like, they go and they play the piano or they do some journaling or doodling or painting or something like that, songwriting. Then the fourth house here, the fourth house lord is a Swa Saturn. It's aspected by Jupiter, which is debilitated in Capricorn. So again, there's some, optimism here, probably on mom's side, but there were issues with mom on some level because Saturn again, it's strong, but it's in Purva Bhadrapada, so there's kind of destructive energy associated with the fourth house of family line and mom. The other thing is that the Lagnatia for the fourth house, which is Saturn, has gone to the second house from the fourth. So the second from any house is considered a Mrigashirsha, or a house of death, longevity. So I would guess that mom had long-term health issues, and potentially also, how would I say, like mental health issues, because the Saturn is also aspecting into the 11th house, but the 11th house is the eighth house from the fourth. So I think deep within there was a lot of tumultuous churning within mom, whoever mom was. Yeah. So mother was ill mentally, physically, probably both. Difficult childhood, also difficulties with education. I'm seeing here because Jupiter, one of the planets representing education, is debilitated here, and Saturn is strong, but again in Purva Bhadrapada. I'm also seeing like not a lot of happiness in early years or in the family line. Again, it doesn't look like this is a happy-go-lucky crew, except maybe again, it seems like there might be some like singing or speaking or something involved here. But the singing and speaking, like that could be a lot of arguments as well because you have Saturn and Mars in the mix in the second house. So what else here? I think there's unhappiness, but again, because of this Jupiter and Rohini in the eighth house, like I'm still seeing that there's still like this is still, despite all the difficulties and challenges, somebody who still looks for and can find the silver lining in troubling times. So it's great. Then the fifth house here, again, the Swa Saturn, difficulties with children, crisis counselor, manager, difficulties with mom's health, as I've mentioned before. Then on the next slide, we have the other houses here. So we have the sixth house. So the sixth lord is this Jupiter, which sounds pretty good. So again, there's kind of optimism here. And we have Rahu here, the north node of the moon, Revati. Revati nakshatra is about hospitality and traveling. And Rahu is an ambition planet. So it kind of seems a little bit like little dreamy, the sixth house, which can be like, how would I say, like can be like daily habits and stuff like that. It can also be the house of enemies. It can also be the house of death. So when I see Jupiter, which is the lord of the sixth house, going to the eighth house, this might be somebody who takes out a lot of debt and it's hard to pay back. So that would figure into all the money issues that I've seen so far. But this would also potentially be somebody like Rahu can also be kind of an obsessive energy. And with that being in the sixth house, this is somebody who's like always thinking about problems. Like it might be hard for this kind of person to not think about problems and just think about relaxing and having fun. And because I mean, this kind of chart is not like this is a easy breezy, take it easy. Yeah. Like, pura vida type, personality. I'm not seeing that. Pretty hardcore personality. And again, this is not just a personality, but this current moment in time for the next 6 months potentially. So, but there's ambition here, in the sixth house. It's just whether that can be made up or not because of the money challenges here. It's hard to say. This could also potentially be like adopted kids. Also because the Saturn is so strong in the fifth house, that could, and for that could be like somebody who has trouble having biological children. So maybe there's an adopted child here with Rahu in the sixth house. What do I have here? 2 times chidra plus ardra, sadness. I'm not sure where I put that. I wrote that in the last line there. I'll have to go back. I don't know. I'll have to go back and see if that still makes sense to me. But anyway, maybe strike that out, the last bit a bit after adopted kids. But anyway, then the seventh house here I've been talking about a bit. So you have a Swan Mars. So there's strength here. So like partner or leadership person. Well, the partner, if there is a spouse or spouse-like partner, they are a leader, an innovator, pioneer type person. Um, they do have troubles, difficulties though, coming from this Swan Saturn. So, and the thing is, Saturn's debilitated in Aries, so it's going to be a lot of trouble for the spouse. So this could bring like independent business, but troubles there, and with Saturn and Mars in the south, this could be again like real estate or manufacturing, engineering, endurance through crisis. This could be like flipping property, like I mentioned. But I would also say like instability with relationships, and it might be that part of what's destabilizing the partner is things concerning the family line, since this is Saturn, and Saturn is the lord of both the fourth house and the fifth. It could also be like a problem related to children and managing that. So then the eighth house lord is a compass Venus, and we've got Jupiter aspected by Moon and Jesta. So yeah, this would be, let's see. I would say like this is somebody who's like considering long-term fair solutions and protection of children. So again, this might be like due to their upbringing and them, the native, not being in a stable household. They might be more of like a protector now because that's kind of what they needed, but nobody was providing that, so they had to become it themselves. So they had to dig deep within themselves. So it's kind of getting back to the theme is like they had to dig deep within themselves to find what they needed to survive rather than find it from others. The other thing is that again, it looks like at some point, like after this Mercury Venus Sun period, there might be a shift out of more of a government position because Venus is also the lord of the eighth house of long-term problems. Yeah, and the other thing is that Jupiter here is in the eighth house, and Jupiter is the lord of the sixth house. So it seems like, that's also part of the kind of energy for this time is that if we're talking about the collective energy for the solstice, then it seems like there might be some ongoing problems that are starting to feel like they're not acute problems anymore, that they're becoming chronic and they might be like really exhausting. Like, and that's what's going on is it's like, when will I catch a break? When will things ease up? That's part of the energy of this chart as well. And again, everything I've seen so far is that, yeah, it looks like, or, if you're feeling this kind of energy, that, yeah, it's going to take a little while to get out of it. I don't think it's, excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. I don't think this is going to be resolved overnight. It's going to be more long term, not long term, but longish term. Not a sprint, maybe not a marathon, although it might start feeling like it is, but like a mid-distance thing where it's like, okay, it might even be one of those things like, how do I pace myself? Because a sprint, you just go full out. With a marathon, you're like, you always reserve a little bit, until you're right towards the finish line, and then you let go whatever, is left. But when you're in that mid space, or the other thing is, kind of like that picture, if you're in the middle of the ocean and you don't even know how far you got to go, it's harder to pace yourself, right? With your physical resources, mental, emotional resources, spiritual resources, even. Okay. Then the ninth house we've been talking about a lot. So Swa, Combus, Mercury with Venus and Sun, pravraja yoga, so life focus. Again, somebody born to lead, head of various organizations. Somebody who probably chooses a lesser paying government or NGO job. Organized. There's tension, sadness here, though. May hold multiple positions simultaneously because of the Mercury situation. Like that's a dual sign. Also, higher education. It looks like this is somebody who would be involved in higher education or at least get some degrees. And I could see this combination again if we're talking about education, like mental health with the Mercury Venus coming out of War and Ardra. like psychology. This could all with the sun, leadership like MBA, marketing outreach, some combination in there. But again, there's some, contentiousness here. And then again, with Mercury and its own sign, I've mentioned before that when I see that, I usually find people who are interested in meditation and Buddhism, so that would be picking up more of the like religious piece here. And rescuing a father and also sibling because of this Mercury Venus Sun combination on the 3-9 axis. Lost childhood, burnout, stress, medically, this kind of stuff. Mercury Venus Sun and the ninth house would be like thigh pain, upper leg pain, especially. The other thing that I thought was interesting is what came out in the news as I was starting to go through this and put the notes together was the U.S. Surgeon General, so that you can kind of think of him as like the top doctor in the United States, medical authority in the United States, said that social media has not been proven safe for children and that we need to put warnings on social media. And this actually fits with the chart. It's kind of funny because it's like Mercury, Venus, at war. So again, loved ones, mind, logic, electricity, computers, um, with authority, sun here. So authority at odds with um, usage of computers. And we have this Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada in the fifth house of children. So damage to um, long-standing ideas or like nervous system. And then we have K2 here in the 12th house. K2 can be like technology, losses through technology. So it's kind of funny that U.S. Surgeon General message or headline that came through actually fits this chart. Then the 10th house here, the 10th house lord is Moon, but it's aspected by, Mars here, which is strong. So again, this is not somebody who, I think this is somebody who's just too strong and powerful to really do like a 9 to 5 job. I mean, they could, but it's like just their energy's too big for that, I think. That's why they keep getting into these leadership positions, although I think it wears them down. And I think also for them, like it's isolating. Because usually if you're the one who comes in and like, saves everybody and you're the strong one, like you're not the one who's like, crying and tired. You can't show that to people. You have to like just keep showing up and people think you're a superhero, but you never get a chance to be on the receiving end of like care and compassion and who's going to rescue you. It's like, and again, with these walls that are built up to even not only like express emotions with others, but I would say express emotions with self. To because again with this Mercury dominated Venus, like um, it's like mind over emotions type thing, mind over matter is what I'm seeing here with this super strong Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. It's like, we're gonna bust our way through mentally, but what's the emotional fallout from all this? That may not be considered. And again, this is somebody who's very clearly rewarded for their efforts. And if they're choosing, government related, low paying jobs, they're not even at for the money. There's something else driving this person on a deeper level of like, maybe they feel like they're rescuing themselves or or being the person they wish they had in their lives when they were younger and offering that to other people. So kind of like healing themselves in a way, but again, it looks like there's some emotional suppression here. Um, and so again, it looks like the only outlet for that emotional stuff is like this third house of like art and maybe like neighbors, siblings potentially. Like maybe that's the only place that this person feels comfortable expressing more emotionally. Um, yeah, then difficulty with bosses. So yeah, 9 to 5 job, not really this person, this chart. 11th house lord is the sun, and that's challenged. It's aspected by a swa Saturn. So this is going to be like, again, one group after another involvement, but also I would say decreased salary and problems with income. Then the 12th house lord is this Mercury, combust, right out of war with Venus, K2 and Hasta. So Hasta is symbolized by a hand. And K2 is all about like either grabbing something, grabbing control of something, or letting something go. And so since we're heading into K2, it might be that that's like another opportunity potentially to reassess, like what do you hang on to and what do you let go of? Yeah. And then we do also have this Sun, Rohini, or not Sun, Jupiter and Rohini aspect in the 12th house. So, this could be like a charitable, Jupiter is a charity, and the 12th house can represent like losses through charity. So it's kind of a good type of charity. It could also represent like spiritual, like isolated spiritual retreats. Could be. So again, maybe at the end of this, maybe up in November, that would be a time to finally kind of step away from being in the middle of the storm. That's going on here, taking a break. Because again, it looks like this is somebody who could easily be like burnt out. Um, be charitable international work, would be like adolescence abroad. Like again, if this was a person, because again, they're starting in Mercury and then they're running K2, and then Venus Sun. So, K2 is sort of like, childhood, adolescent time. Again, if it was a person, they probably felt isolated and they might have moved, they might have been separated from their family potentially. And generally, this is somebody who might feel isolated and who needs to kind of step away. Maybe that's the only way that they can kind of decompress from all the stress, because there clearly is stress here. They need to step away. This could also be when you have Ketu or Rahu in the 12th house of losses and stuff like that, and kind of stepping away, isolate places. This could also, Ketu or Rahu can indicate drug use, um, technology, foreign places. It could also, with Hasta there, Hasta can represent, especially when you have Ketu or Rahu and Hasta, like alcohol. So unfortunately, this person, it looks like maybe during their teen years got involved with drugs or like, stepped away, uh, and or sorry, I couldn't stop the recording at the time, just kept the sneeze, sorry. Um, but this may be somebody who isolates and, alcohol is part of the isolation process. Sorry, there's a second one. Yeah, like that might be the way that they kind of, I don't know, handle their emotions, but it actually can be like a suppression or at least like dim the emotion so they're not overwhelmed. But again, it looks like they're kind of going off on their own and not showing that to people. Um, yeah. Or maybe they just kind of take off randomly sometimes and you don't know where they are because they're just off, almost like in a cave, like lone wolf in a cave type thing, is what I'm saying. Okay, so let's take a look at the subzodiacs or amshas, also known as the divisional charts, to get a little bit more detail. And also, these charts are mostly used for timing. So what we do here is like currently the current dasha period or planetary period is Mercury, Venus, Mercury. So I've circled the Venus and Mercury to kind of show you where those planets are and what kind of energy they would give in these different aspects of somebody's life or areas of somebody's life. And then that's switching to Mercury, Venus, K2 on November 1st. So then I've circled K2 because that's the only thing that's switching. So that'll give you some indication of like how the energy will be switching once the K2 subperiod or Antra keeps up in November, for this moment in time at least, yeah. So that also means that because we're, as I mentioned, because we're not shifting out of Mercury, Venus, Mercury until November, like we still got a few solid months of this Mercury, Venus, like recovery of, potential fallouts with friends and family and stuff like that. Okay, so the first chart here at the top is an Navamsha D9. This is for spouses and its partnerships. K2 is not well placed, and there's two parivartanas in this chart, one between Saturn and Venus and Mars and Sun. So Mars and Sun are the two leadership planets. Saturn is obstacles, delays, and Venus is loved ones. So, and also Mercury and Venus are in the 10th house here, work. So for spouses and stuff like that, I think for the current time, they're really focused on work. And then Saturn is there too with so they're, because of the parivartana exchange of houses. So spouses and partners are really focused on just doing very solid, concrete things right now. Um, yeah, so, and then there's leadership, structure, practical advising. Um, there might also be to some degree because there's a parivartana between Mars in the fifth house and Sun in the eighth house. There may be this like, learning, considering how to lead children or dependents, since it looks like there's issues with children here. But I think for the most part, the spouse is just very like being very practical here. Um, because again, not only do we have Mercury and Venus in the 10th house where Saturn is also, and Saturn's going to be Swa, and that's the constellation there is Capricorn, which is a movable earth sign. This is somebody who's like a building type energy. But you also have the moon there. So the two emotional planets, Moon and Venus, and then Mercury there, the mind. So this is somebody who's just very like action oriented and very practical oriented. And then there might be a little bit of a change once K2 pops up, but it looks like this person's just like head down and trying to, do what they can to make things better. Yeah, not a bad time, I think, but just a very practical, like a lot of hard work though, sure, to try to build better mindset is what I'm seeing here, build better relationships. Um, not fast and easy. Even though there's some fire and motivation here with the parivartana with Mars and Sun. Um, but yeah, like just head down doing the work essentially. And the Draken is the D3. The next chart here is this is for siblings. KT is not well placed. Um, but we have Venus Swa in the fifth house and Mercury there, and then Saturn there, which is exalted there. So it looks like siblings potentially are focused on solid counseling because that's the fifth house is children, but it's also counseling for kids. And then I would also say potentially an artistic platform of some kind, because you have Venus, Swan, Saturn. So this is a very strong fifth house. And the fifth house can represent arts, but like usually more performing arts or something like that, more than like written, like something you would hang on a wall. Um, yeah, so it might be the sibling is involved in some sort of artistic endeavor, which isn't surprising given that we had, right, Venus and Mercury with Sun aspecting the third house of siblings in the native chart. So, again, it looks like there might be a little bit of a shift when KT moves around, but currently it looks like siblings are mostly okay. Then the next two charts we have here, we have the Saptamsha D7 for children and the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents and grandparents. So in the Saptamsha D7, Venus is not well placed. And the other thing is that Venus is the third lord, which is a negative house, and the eighth lord. So, and this is a pretty long book to your subperiod here, Venus. So, I could see this again being difficulties with relationships with children. The children in and of themselves, maybe with the native, maybe with others. The other thing is that if somebody's looking to get pregnant, um, that could be potentially challenging because Venus is in a negative sign. Mercury is strong in its own house in the seventh house. That's great. So that might be like the partner has kids, like maybe their stepchildren involved here, and that could be the Rahu in the sixth house where I said adopted children. That could also potentially be stepchildren because they're not blood related. Um, But the thing is, you have Saturn aspecting Mercury, so there could be difficulties even with stepchildren here. The other thing is that the fifth house of this chart of the D7, you can see there's all these malefics, K2, Mars, Saturn, Sun. This is not an easy fifth house, even though they're well placed here. The other thing is you do have Jupiter aspecting here where it's exalted, but Jupiter is debilitated in the 11th house. So I'm seeing like, relationship issues here with kids, difficulties potentially with having kids, or if there are kids around, relationship issues. Um, yeah, like these four malefics in the fifth house. This could be like many attempts, but not great counseling or inadequate or mixed messages regarding like how to get pregnant, maybe IVF, because you have K2 technology, Mars surgery, Saturn delays obstacles, Sun medical stuff here, energies here. The other thing is that Saturn is aspecting both Mercury and Moon, the two mind planets. So there could be like a lot of anxiety, depression, OCD type stuff going on here. So whether it's the children themselves or the energy of the native related to children, I don't think this is like an easy time, um, mentally and emotionally. So then the Dwadashamsha, D12, parents and grandparents. Mercury is not well placed. It is in parivartana with Mars. Um, and there's strength here. There's actually 5 planets that are swa. So moon's in its own sign, sun's in its own sign. When you do the parivartana, Mars in its own sign, Mercury's in its own sign, Venus is in its own sign. So there's a lot of strength here. Um, but I could see like acute issues with like pain and bleeding, surgery maybe because of this Venus, not Venus, Mercury, Mars, parivartana in the bringing issues from the fourth house of mom potentially to the sixth house of acute situations. Um, it looks like there's pretty good counseling going on here, like regarding parents, like if there's medical issues, which again seems like there could be medical issues because the fifth house is pretty strong here. Um, and then also like again, Sun is Swa, Mars Swa, Mercury Swa, Moon is Swa. So, like, looks like parents are fighters and talkers, which again reflects the natal chart. So, not too bad. Even though there are issues, it looks like there's strength here as well. So that's good. Let's see. Then other subzodiacs. So now we're looking at the Sadamsha D24 for education at the top, and then after that, Dakshamsha D10 for career after. So the first chart, Mercury's not well placed, but it is swa, so there'll be some protection. And again, you'll see that a lot of these subcharts, the planets that are not well placed happen to be in the sixth house of like acute issues. So of note, make note of that. Venus is with a debilitated Saturn, and it's also with its sole enemy. So even though Venus is in a positive house, Venus is still challenged. And the fourth house again is like education. So there may not be great practical advice about education here. And then there's a parivartana with Mars and Moon. Moon is debilitated, Mars is debilitated, and then when you swap them, they're both swa. And so with Mars and Moon all over the chart, Mars can be like an angry, irritated planet, and Moon is the mind, like the emotional mind. I could see this being like a lot of irritation with like education issues. Trying, and Mars again debilitated here, and Venus with a debilitated Saturn. It's like I think this is somebody who's trying really hard, but isn't getting anywhere fast or easily, and so they're getting frustrated and just sort of like, is it even all worth it? Is kind of what I'm getting from this chart. Um, yeah, in terms of education, any sort of educational issues for the native. Then the Jashamsha D10, Mercury and K2 are not well placed. Again, it's not too surprising because the 10th house was we have a Mars aspecting there. It's debilitated in Cancer. So, like I said, the 10th house is not strong for this chart. Venus is debilitated, even though it's in a positive house. There's a parivartana with Mercury between Venus and Mercury. So, That's going to bring up Venus and Mercury somewhat, but again, you've got strong, exalted Saturn with Mercury and K2. Uh, again, in the sixth house. So again, there's going to be like some protection about long-term diversions and delays regarding career, at least in terms of 9 to 5 stuff. Then if we look at the Rudramsha here, this is the D11 for income and also group, social support. And then after that, we have the Chaturashamsha D4 for assets. So let's see, Rajamsha. Venus and K2 are not well placed in this chart. Venus is aspected by Saturn, so that's going to again bring delays, more obstacles and delays and practical issues because Venus is in Capricorn. So Saturn's going to be very strong, dragging on Venus here. And as I mentioned, there were money issues in the chart, so we're seeing it here again. Um, and this could also be, again, if this is social support. We also saw that like that massive Saturn was aspecting the 11th house, and the Lord of the 11th house sun is karako bhavanasha and bhavam, in Mrigashirsha. So again, it's like we're seeing here like issues with money, issues with group, that sort of thing. Although at least Mercury is well placed, and Mercury's with a swath Jupiter, so that's really nice to see. So all is not lost here, and with Mercury being with a strong Jupiter in the 5th house, this could be like mantra, tantra, yantra, counseling, spiritual counseling, that sort of thing. So again, with the uh, being in the Mercury Venus Disha period of the natal chart, and not being related to the 9th house of seeking authority, but also potentially religion and spirituality, because of the challenges that this person, again, if it was a person going through, but also for, again, we're talking about the June solstice. So the difficulties here might be kind of driving somebody towards spiritual answers because the physical world, the 3D world, is just feels very hard and dense and concrete, like almost like no matter what you try, nothing's really working. And so there's this, because so far, like, except for the 3rd house, it's like most of the houses are challenged in one way or another. So there's no easy soft spot to land, really. It might feel like that in the next few months, unfortunately. But, there are other gifts to be had, so maybe it's a time to go deeper into art and express oneself that way rather than, relationships, since it looks like relationships are challenged. And even if, money and jobs are not stable, there's still some coming in. And maybe, again, it's like about deriving, again, digging deeper than maybe you've had to dig before to develop even deeper wells of endurance and strength. Yeah. It might feel like walking through the desert, but even deserts, when you get a little bit of rain, wow, they just bloom overnight and they're so beautiful and such a kind of unique type of beauty. And even like deserts and stuff like that, right? Like in a lot of cultures, like just the thought of going out to the desert, like there's this whole kind of like what do they call it, like walkabouts in Australia, right? Where when you become of age, one of the things you do is you just kind of walk out into the wilderness and I think it's about, I don't know for sure, but I think it's about, having to find deep within you the intuition and gut instinct and survival skills on whatever level, mental, physical, or emotional, to survive in a very, unpredictable, uncertain place and time, wild animals or, that sort of thing. Um, and to grow into maturity, like become like, a true man or woman in the eyes of like the group, that sort of thing. So again, that's the kind of energy here is that the challenges that again this person or moment in time are bringing, it's about up leveling that and find the strength and leadership within oneself. And even though it's not fun and light and fluffy, again, there's still a lot of goodness and come from that in terms of moving forward. Yeah. So anyway, what else do we have here? So again, a lot of practical issues here because we have this Saturn on Venus. But again, I think this, at least there's a strong Mercury here with this strong Jupiter backing it. So getting education and wise counsel, probably spiritual counseling here to, help through this challenging time. Then the Chatra Chamsha D4, you can see all the planets here. Venus, Mercury, and K2 are not well placed, which again, we saw all the chidra grahas, really had a relationship with the second house of savings and assets. So this isn't surprising. Also, the Lugnatia, which is Mars, is debilitated because Mars is in Cancer. Um, and then running after the Mercury Mahadasha, then comes K2, then comes Venus. So, again, even after this particular shift from Mercury, Venus, Mercury to Mercury, Venus, K2 in November, whenever the Mahadasha Mercury ends, then you're in K2. Then whenever K2 ends, you're in Venus, and Mercury and K2 is a shorter Dasha period, but Venus and Mercury are very long. So again, if this is somebody's chart, it might be like the first half of their life, like they can't accumulate anything of significant wealth or value. Yeah. And then, at least there's some protection here because Mercury is Swa, but Venus is debilitated. But at least Venus, the debilitation of Venus is bhanga because you have Mercury there, the Lord, the dispositor that's creating the debilitation for Venus is with its dispositor. So that's going to bring Venus up a little bit. So there's some protection, but it's not going to be a very strong Venus. So again, somebody who I think would have ongoing money or financial issues, and for the next few months, that may be the case as well. Okay, next we have the health amsha subzodiac. So at the top we have the Tajik Shashtamsha D6 for acute issues, then the Tajik Ashtamamsha D8 for chronic issues, then the Bhamsha D27 for strength and resilience. So in the first chart here, K2 is not well placed, but luckily Mercury and Venus are, and Mercury is Swa, so that's good. Unfortunately, though, we do have Mars in the mix there, and Mars is the sole enemy of Mercury. And we do have this massive Jupiter aspecting Venus, and Jupiter is the sole enemy of Venus. Sole enemies is a concept you only use in the Amshas, by the way. You don't use that in the natal chart. And again, the Mercury, Venus are in the 11th house of clubs, group, society. So again, difficulties with friends and loved ones I'm seeing here. But I think trying to find some wisdom and spiritual counsel to find your way through, potentially. But then the D8, Mercury's not well placed, and that's the Mahadasha, so that's, significant. But again, you have this like massive Jupiter on Mercury. Jupiter again is Swa, coming from Pisces. So again, there's still this like, I would say, spiritualization of the mind that's potentially happening here. That's going to be important for, again, working through this challenging time. Venus is Swa, but it is aspected by Mars, which is debilitated. And not only is Mars debilitated but it's aspected by Saturn. So, no, actually, that's not true. I take that back. I have to fix that. Yeah, forget that part. I'll scrub that. So, but Venus is aspected by a debilitated Mars. So again, there's going to be some chaos going on with friends, loved ones, inner circle, family. K2 is strong because its dispositor Jupiter is strong, so that's good. But it is also aspected by the Saturn, so there's still like delays and obstacles going on here. So what I'm seeing in this chart is that like chronically, kind of more in the long term, it's like trying to maintain optimism and a spiritual perspective despite obstacles. And again, it might feel chronic or at least very deep and heavy and stuck. But yeah, there's still some support here as well. Then the Bhamsha D27 for strength and resilience. This one was more challenging, I think. Venus and Ketu are not well placed. Venus is aspected by Mars, where it's debilitated again. So again, difficulties with loved ones, a change going on there, ongoing chaos with loved ones. K2 is aspected by Saturn, where and Saturn's exalted in uh, Libra, and then we have Swam Mars there. So we have Saturn and Mars on K2. So there's a lot of strong and unusual opposition here. That's the sixth house of enemies. So it just might feel like again you're not catching a break. Like it's and Saturn and Mars too. It's like this is the endurance combination. This is like the workaholic combination. This is the athletic engineering combination. So it's like um, almost no matter what is tried here, there's no breakthrough. There's no shifting. There's no. So it might feel like you're sinking or at least exhausted here. Luckily, though, Mercury is in a positive house and it's swa, so that's great. And Mercury being in the fifth house here, again, this could be like mantra, tantra, yantra, meditation type stuff. And it is aspected by Jupiter. So again, we're seeing in all three of these health amshas that Jupiter keeps supporting Mercury. So again, spiritualizing the mind, spiritualizing the decisions, spiritualizing the conversations. Seems to be key here. And again, because Mercury's combust, this is not something that this is more of like an inside job than an external job. So the 3D world, the material world, may seem very concrete, like nothing's changing, nothing's giving, but the way to potentially move forward is to shift the internal conversation with self, shift the internal thoughts, shift the internal dialogue. Yeah. So yeah. So there you go. Okay, and then on the final slide here, we have the Achamsha, the D5 for innate spirituality, and the Vimshamsha, the D20 for formal worship, which is kind of more like formal religious, being involved with more formal religious groups or institutions. So again, starting at the top here, Venus is not well placed, but it is exalted, so that's great. But Venus exalted in the third house, again, I'm getting back to like art, maybe neighbors, maybe siblings, that sort of thing. So again, that third house seems to be kind of the soft spot, if anything. And then what else do we have? We have Mercury parivartana with Mars. So we're gonna have Mercury, Mars, Moon in the sixth house. So again, this is creating new mental habits, I'm seeing. The other thing is, again, we have Jupiter aspecting Mercury, so kind of spiritualization of the mind. We do also have Saturn on on Mercury, so this is kind of like potentially like daily meditation or spiritual practice to maintain balance, especially mental balance through the up and down cycles. Through again generating new thoughts. So we're seeing that fairly consistently. Like, again, there's a lot of challenges in many places with relationships and work and income and all this kind of stuff. But, um, and that's the thing too, is that, it's like, this clearly wasn't like a happy-go-lucky type of chart to look at or moment in time. But whenever I've been through moments like this myself, or I've had like clients that I work with, and they're going through a really tough time, one of the analogies I bring up that can be helpful is it's kind of like, when things are like super dark and there seems like there's no way forward. Sometimes it actually brings clarity in a weird way, like in a sort of unexpected way, because sometimes things are seem like nothing seems to be going well or easily and that sort of thing. But there can be certain like just points of light, almost like cosmic breadcrumbs. Like maybe it's just like the only thing that's, brings any kind of lightness is like, I don't know, a 3-minute cat or dog video or something like that. Or like, here in this chart, like some kind of art or creative endeavor, like a craft or something like that, which doesn't have to be highfalutin, like it doesn't have to be like a museum piece, but any kind of, again, pinpoint prick of lights, almost like, following, guiding by the stars at night. And it gets back to even that first picture I had on the first slide there of like being a boat in the middle of the night, in the middle of the ocean, not knowing how far or close you are to any land or stability, and then digging deep within my oneself. But also, like, that's how they used to navigate, like when they crossed the Pacific Ocean and stuff like that. Is I remember being in Hawaii, and there was at some lecture or exhibition or demonstration or something of how the Hawaiians would navigate across the Pacific Ocean with no land in sight by using the stars and things like that. It was like fascinating. But that's the thing too, is like when things are so dark in our lives, there's usually like one little, or two little points of light, like maybe one person, like maybe just one neighbor you have like some silly, pleasant conversation with, or, maybe it's a, pet or pet video or something like that, just, um, that's just like a breadcrumb that lead you forward. And if you kind of follow those breadcrumbs, eventually the breadcrumbs start to become bigger and slowly, night turns into day, that kind of thing. What's also kind of, somewhat kind of funny for me is that I happen to be in the northern hemisphere when I'm doing this. And for us, this is like, the height of the sun and heat and, full strength of the sun. In the southern hemisphere, like this would be like, it almost seems like this talk is more appropriate somehow for the southern hemisphere, even though I personally am in like summer solstice mode. Um, but again, it's like this is more of like on the, this is happening even from the chart. You can see this our rhythms may not be syncing up with the rhythms of kind of the outer world. And that seems to be the point of this chart too, is it's like our, even though it's like sunny and hot and, people are wearing shorts and sandals and stuff like that, like on a deeper level, a lot of people might be feeling this, drag and challenge, and, it's not feeling like summer. It's not feeling easy breezy and, put the top down in the car and go eat ice cream type feeling. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just might feel kind of like out of sorts. Like, why doesn't this feel like an easy breezy summer? Well, there are deeper kind of transformations going on here, it seems like, and they're important. For what reason? I'm not sure, but again, it does seem like it's about going deep within oneself to find again the solutions, and not only the solutions, but be the solution that one needs to, work your way through this kind of heavy moment in time, it seems like, and it looks like for the next few months. And again, part of this, I think, is just this massive Saturn that's in its own sign, Purva Bhadrapada. And the other thing is within the next couple of weeks, by the end of the month, Saturn's going retrograde. It's getting stronger even. So the next, I think we have what, about 10 more months of Saturn in the sign. It's going to be pretty tough. It is going to be pretty tough. And again, if you watch my video for the solstice in December, that was that was the kind of contradiction of um, analyzing the moment of the December solstice of last year, 2023, because it was like this massive Saturn, but also above it was this, how do I say, like the Lugna nakshatra was in either Purva Falguni or Uttar Falguni. It was all about like the finer things of life and the uh, like an enjoyment period and partying and socializing. And it was like, yeah, with this like massive Saturn below it, in its own sign of like, and I think it was at Shatapisha at the time, which is like 100 healers. And there's just such a juxtaposition between those two energies of really heavy delays and obstacles, and then this lightness and fun. And I think the whole point of that chart was, to grab whatever you can in terms of lightness and joy and happiness. And this looks like this is the kind of push, the mid run, mid race push in that direction. So it's, yeah. So anyway, so now we're, again, it might be like pretty dark at this time. And again, to really focus on any points of light in life are, I think, what are going to steer you towards your land, your solid ground once again. So then we have, okay, I went through the top one there. Then the Vimshamsha, did I go through most of it? Or did I stop? I got distracted, went on off piste there. Let me just make sure I finished the D5. So parivartana with Mercury and Mars. Yeah, so again, it's just, the bringing the daily meditation and daily spiritual practice and to maintain the inner equilibrium throughout the ups and down cycles, creating new thoughts. And yeah. So then the Vimshamsha D20 formal worship. So this is kind of an interesting, it's kind of surprised by this a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why, but so all the grahas are well placed, so that's kind of nice. Venus and Moon are in the ninth house, aspected by, and they're also aspecting the third house. So what's interesting is Venus and Moon are the two aesthetic arts planets. So it's kind of like the natal chart here, where when you have Venus and Moon, the two arts and emotional planets in the ninth house, I would start thinking about like satsang, like spiritual community. Then with Venus and Moon aspect in third house, I would think about any kind of, art endeavor, like maybe even clothing. Venus and Moon can be like clothing and fashion and that sort of thing. Um, but so again, it's kind of like satsang, spiritual community. However, um, so like if you went to some sort of more formal group for satsang, I think there would be support there, but I don't think it's about necessarily getting like deep, into conversations and things like that with people. I mean, there might be some, there might be the occasional conversation or whatever, but let me just talk about the rest of the chart and I'll come back to why I think um, it might just be being around people physically more than like getting into any kind of personal or deep conversations. That's going to be helpful here. And let me go through the rest of the chart so maybe that'll become more clear why I'm saying that. Then you have Mercury here in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society, but you have this debilitated Saturn. So obstacles, delays, anxiety, and you have Mars aspecting there. So again, you have this like maybe a lot of initiative here, but again, two malefics on Mercury, including Mars, which is a soul enemy. This could feel it might feel like one-on-one conversations and relationships right now might feel forced. Is what I'm seeing here, rather than truly uplifting, truly emotionally fulfilling, that kind of thing. Um, then if we look at K2, what's K2 doing in the second house? So this is like, again, family inner circle. So Jupiter is exalted here, which is nice, but you have Mars here aspecting that house, and Mars is debilitated there. Then you have Rahu and Ketu. So you have three malefic planets on this Jupiter. So this could be like conversations, even though they're well intended. This could be conversations with friends and family that just kind of go sideways, and you're like, "What happened? I thought we were just talking about the weather or something," and somehow it turned into this other thing that wasn't like pleasant or completely unexpected or something. So again, it just seems like maybe, and that's the thing too, is like from the natal chart, like I kept talking about walls and things like that, and like this protective energy. It might be that again, if you're going through, especially through the next few months, like a very challenging time, it might be a time to protect the energy. And so, to express the emotions through like more kind of safe means, like just journaling, about how you feel rather than talking to a friend or a loved one and, um, doing the inner work. Um, and again, being your own leader and finding your answers and solutions deep within, rather than like co-counseling or something like that with somebody else. And that's what I'm seeing here is again, it might be, again, it might feel like I remember myself, I've been involved with different singing groups and stuff like that, and sometimes it was nice just to be around people and feel like, especially singing, like you kind of feel the vibration of yourself, in your throat and your chest and the people around you and stuff like that. And it's just sort of like a nice feeling, even if you're not having whatever personal deep conversations with people around you. Um, there can be, feel some sense of belonging rather than like completely isolated. But sometimes, like again, if you're going through a challenging time, then having like deep personal conversations with people or like trying to meet, new people, like, if you're not like in a great headspace, emotional space, like that's, you might kind of end up attracting people who like in the long term are, the most positive or uplifting. Like you might develop like more of a wound mate. Because if you have all this heavy stuff in your mind and your heart, then that's what tends to come out in conversations, and then you end up bonding with somebody over like challenges and trauma rather than like uh, happy times and good memories and things like that. Um, so again, it might be like being emotionally vulnerable and like maybe an art or singing class to be around people would be good. To have like again that more lighter, uh, but still social time. Um, like not too deep, that might give some sense of comfort without being draining. Because again, it seems like, again, the natal chart is kind of about being in survival mode. Yeah. And so, yeah. So again, not the most uplifting or light, fun energy. But we got to deal with what we got to deal with, right? So again, even if you're like a yoga person or something like that, then, it's kind of like when you're in a yoga pose and it's not that comfortable, but the teacher keeps saying, well, take a few more breaths and take a few more breaths. And you're kind of like, okay, and your mind starts getting irritated and your muscles are getting irritated. And you're just like, when is this going to be over? And then, like, you take a few breaths, and then suddenly, sometimes, not always, you take a breath and then you do actually surrender to the moment. And your body surrenders, and your mind surrenders, and your heart surrenders. And then you develop, sometimes because of that, you develop a new level of flexibility or strength. And then maybe the next time you can kind of jump into that pose without it being so shaky. I thought might be helpful as well. Okay, but yeah, so there you go. June solstice for 2024. As always, I want to thank you for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. If you're looking for more birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, you can check out my birth charts archive list 2024 video for a list of all those charts I've looked at. On the channel and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings live on Zoom and as recorded video. And if you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. Also, I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. So if that's of interest to you, the name of that channel is called Nature Source Care. So as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, helpful, and useful as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So until the next one, take care and namaste.